The state of Texas is facing growing calls to halt the execution of Rodney Reed, an African-American man who spent over 20 years in prison for a rape and murder he says he did not commit. A group of 26 Texas lawmakers, including both Democrats and Republicans, penned a letter this week asking Governor Greg Abbott to stop the execution planned for November 20th. More than 1.4 million people have signed an online petition to save Reed's life. Supporters include celebrities Kim Kardashian West, Rihanna, and Meek Mill. Rodney Reed was sentenced to die after being convicted by an all-white jury for the 1996 murder of Stacey Stites, a 19-year-old white woman. The two were having an affair at the time. But substantial evidence has since emerged implicating Stites' fiancé, a white police officer named Jimmy Fennell, who was later jailed on kidnapping and rape charges in another case. In a major development, a man who spent time in jail with Fennell signed an affidavit last month asserting that Fennell had admitted in prison he killed his fiancée because she was having an affair with a black man. Later in the show, we'll be joined by Rodney Reed's brother and sister-in-law. But first, let's turn to the documentary, A Plea for Justice, made by Filmmakers for Justice.
Bastrop County Sheriff says they found the body of a woman along the dirt road of 1441. Now, let me tell you, this morning, 19-year-old Stacey Lee Stites was reported missing and never arrived at work.
In 2006, a small documentary film team helped expose how an innocent man ended up on Texas's death row.
But my personal opinion when I heard that she had been killed was that Fennell had done it immediately. And I know a number of people around here that felt the same way.
It soon became apparent that the case against Rodney Reed was not just a small-town affair.
And I believe the state knew about it. I believe the district attorney for Bastrop knew about it. I believe the Sheriff's Department knew about it, and I believe the Bastrop Police Department knew about it. And I do believe they covered that up. They did not want a fellow officer implicated.
In the past 13 years, the evidence has continued to mount in favor of Rodney Reed's innocence.
Stacey Stites was found murdered on the afternoon of April 23rd, and her fiancé, Jimmy Fennell, claimed that she was murdered while on her way to work that morning.
Like at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, roughly 3 o'clock in the morning. And the state theorized that Rodney Reed had somehow abducted her while she was on her way to work, kidnapped her, took her out to a remote location, sexually assaulted her, and murdered her. And the state's case really rested on two pillars. One was forensic science. They had 3 experts who claimed that the presence of a small amount of Rodney's semen was evidence that he had sexually assaulted Miss Stites at around the time that she was murdered. And they relied on Jimmy Fennell to establish this timeline and to establish that they were a happy couple in which Miss Stites would not be having an affair with Mr. Reed. Meanwhile, at the trial, Mr. Reed presented some evidence to witnesses who said that they did know about this affair. In fact, his unprepared lawyers had access to other witnesses, but they went uninvestigated and not presented. And so over the 2 decades that we've been working on this case, every aspect of the state's proof has essentially evaporated. The state, for months, investigated Jimmy Fennell as this prime suspect in the murder. And this was even before...
This is Stacey's fiancé. Yes. And cop. He's a cop.
So local law enforcement officer Jimmy Fennell, who's engaged to Stacey Stites, was the prime suspect for months. They knew it was not Fennell's semen in the body, but they still believed that he was a suspect. He was actively interrogated, and after he failed a second polygraph test on facts about the murder, he invoked his right to silence and refused to cooperate. That investigation, however, stopped after Mr. Reed's semen was identified. And suddenly, Jimmy Fennell was no longer their suspect, and Rodney Reed. Jimmy Fennell was no longer their suspect, and Rodney Reed was prosecuted and then ultimately sentenced to death.
And so the alternative theory of what happened with the rookie cop, Jimmy Fennell, the fiancé of Stacey Stites, was what happened that night.
Well, and so every piece of evidence that we've found over the course of 20 years now points to Jimmy Fennell. It points to the fact that the law enforcement officers investigating this case who suspected Fennell were right. When you look at Fennell's background, he had a history of excessive force even prior to the murder. His girlfriend, right after the murder, described him as emotionally abusive, virulently racist, and
he's white and Rodney Reed is black.
Yes. And so the idea that an interracial relationship would not be something he would like.
And didn't someone quote Stacey as saying that he told her he would kill her if she was ever unfaithful?
Yes. In fact, that's something we've heard from several witnesses now. And as we've looked into this case, we've always suspected things about Jimmy Fennell from the beginning. I took this case in 2002. And lo and behold, several years later, I pick up the newspaper and we find out that Jimmy Fennell had been arrested. And ultimately, he was prosecuted and pled guilty to crimes related to kidnapping and raping a woman while he was on patrol. And when the Texas Department of Public Safety investigated Jimmy Fennell, they found that this was not a one-off incident, that there was a pattern going back years. And so here we have the defense, which was woefully unprepared, did not have the time to present a case, and now we know everything about that defense. Everything that Rodney Reed was saying has, in fact, been shown to be true.
I want to go to Connie Lear now, victim of the Georgetown police officer Jimmy Fennell, Stacey Stites' fiancé. Fennell was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for raping Lear after he took her into police custody. This is a clip from A Plea for Justice of Lear being interviewed on the show Crime Watch Daily.
He just kept telling me to shut up. He asked me to dance for him, and I told him no. When I told him no, he got mad, and he grabbed me and slammed me up against the back of his car where the trunk is. I kept telling him to stop, but he just told me to shut up, that I knew I liked it. And then if I told anybody, that he'd hunt me down when he got out of prison and kill me.
Fennell was convicted of raping her and went to jail for 10 years.
He pled guilty to kidnapping and sex charges relating to that arrest. Again, the Texas law enforcement investigation of Jimmy Fennell arising out of that actually showed that that was a pattern of conduct. And so this was not an isolated incident. And so everything that the defense was saying to the jury, everything that we suspected when we first took this case, has proven to be true.
Where is he now? Because he just recently got out of prison.
We've been told by folks who've actually been out to the church and visited that he's a pastor at a church in Granger, Texas.
A pastor?
Yes.
And what did they say about his congregation, about his church?
They didn't talk about all that, but basically that they went up there, and I think one person said that they delivered a free Rodney Reed bumper sticker to like one of the members of the congregation, and they were like, I don't want that.
Roderick, what are you calling for now?
We're calling for justice. We're calling for Rodney to get a new trial, because we were confident that when given this new trial, with all the evidence over all these years, all the testimonies and stuff from different witnesses and everything, that Rodney is coming home. We're confident of that. All we have to do is have the opportunity to present that. Because his life's on the line. I can't see them taking my brother's life for something he didn't do, and you did not give us that avenue to save his life. You are executing an innocent man, and at the end of the day, I don't see how anybody could sleep with that on their conscience, their mind, their heart.